When we go and we try to acquire an asset, what we're doing is our director of acquisition and our underwriting team is going to go out and physically do a comp set study. All right, so they're going to do it. They're going to do it from their computers. They're going to scrape as many rates as they possibly can. They're going to make phone calls. They're going to try to figure out what, the set of where a site is a class A, B, C, wherever it falls. Is it a mom and pop operator? Is it a REIT operator, institutional operator? And then we even go as far as during the due diligence process to go out to the sites. And I remember back in the day, and Chris always laughs at me, but we used to go and we'd go and rent a unit at the competitor, and then we'd go and we'd walk the unit space after everything was closed down, so we could get the number count, we could find out how occupied they were, we could take a look at their attributes versus what we were going to build or what we were acquiring in order to have a competitive advantage. Now, what you have to do once you have already acquired the site and in operations, we use a software package called Veritech, and Veritech does exactly what I said before, except it scrapes it on a second by second basis. Whenever you run it, it's going to pull all the web rates for individual unit types and sizes. And then what we look at is three things. If we're well occupied, then we may want to be the leader in the market for that particular unit type. All right. Or we could be, if we're right around stabilization, almost stabilization in the 80s, we may be at an equilibrium point with them. And so we'll try to stay equal to them. But if we're in a lease up, then we may want to drop our rates down in order to get the market to come in and purchase the unit. And so there are, when we're going through this, as you said, it's extremely fluid, and it has to be, it's a really unique tool, because if, for example, you're not covering your move outs at the end of the month, you can actually dial it up and you can lower your rates in order to cover your move outs. And then you can, the next day, turn your rates back up again so that you can start pushing your economic occupancy at the exact same time. So it is very possible for you to move in 2 days ago on a 5x5 unit and get it for $45. I'm just using that as an example. And Chris to move in 2 days later, and because the market demand dictated it, that his is $65. So that's how we're always pushing the value add pricing. That's how we do it on a daily basis.
From an operations standpoint, this is part of our due diligence process through the acquisition period. A big one is a lease audit, right? Going lease by lease to understand, is the occupancy report is the occupancy report accurate based on the actual leases we have on hand? And you'd be surprised some of the ways over the years people have tried to inflate those numbers, as you can imagine. I think the other thing on the audit side of things is just understanding true tax base, right? Going through each one of our underwriting assumptions and making sure that what we've assumed or the data that we have we can validate with specific information, either from the site or the municipality, so that we can ensure that we're correct in our underwriting assumptions.
We're going to pull, through our underwriting, we're going to pull the trailing 12. We're going to ask for bank statements. We're going to look at unit mixes. We're going to look at all those things, and to ensure that our projections are backed up by or validated by data. And as Chris said, to do a walkthrough, our people will physically go out there. We'll ask for a rent roll or a walkthrough list, and we'll check every lock. One of the pitfalls, or it used to be, everybody's very well occupied now, but one of the pitfalls back in the day when people were selling is that owner, that mom and pop operator may call their friends and family up and say, hey, why don't you come rent a unit for 2 or 3 months? I'm going to sell this thing. And so you get in there, the physical occupancy looks great, and you're like, wow, I'm buying a stabilized asset. And in reality, what happens is after you acquire it 2 or 3 months later, you lose 20% of your tenant base, and now you're back to leasing it back up again. So you need to take a look at your rent roll. If names pop up again and again and again, those last names, be wary of that. There are a lot of other things that we do, from using third-party tax consultants and third-party insurance in order to make sure, because, payroll, insurance, taxes, those things are your big expenses per month on a self-storage facility. So you want to make sure that those big expenses, you've got those dialed in order to really underwrite the asset and understand what your revenue and your expense, and then ultimately what your NOI is going to be in order to cover your debt service.
Any deferred maintenance, right? So our project manager usually is on site looking for deferred maintenance issues. Hey, maybe the parking lot needs to be repaved, or the roof looks shoddy, or Todd, around the gutters, we got to replace the gutters. So they're coming up with a CapEx budget when we acquire the asset to say, all right, here's where we feel like we're going to need to spend money. And especially if there's an expansion component to that acquisition, our project manager is going out to say, all right, here's what I think we're going to need to spend to build out this 15,000 square foot climate building that you guys are planning on.
It's important, but it's also attractive to a buyer in looking at self-storage in general, because the maintenance is very minimal. You're going to get your normal wear and tear on your gates and things that the customers use, your doors, your gates, your keypads, things along those lines. But for the most part, these are metal buildings with sometimes HVAC on them. And most of this is set. You have pretty good warranties on them. You have pretty good use life on these things. And it's very rare to have a large capital expenditure down the road, within your first 10 to 15 years of owning a facility.